Hi, I'm Matrix and Dynamite Baits backed Dan Jones, and you join me here today at Wold Farm Fisheries, which is a beautiful fishery situated in the countryside of Northamptonshire. It's actually about a quarter mile off the end of Santapod Raceway, so you might hear some cars going up and down today in the background. Basically, we've come here today and we've sat on a lake called the Oaks Lake. There's a few different lakes here. There's one which is called Wold Lake, which is mainly big carp and catfish, and there's three sort of match lakes. The Oaks, which is what we're on today, which is the main match lake, which is absolutely full of skimmers and carp, and there's odd barbel here as well, but whether we'll see one of them today I'm not sure. There's Islands Lake, which is the next lake along, which is full of all sorts of different types of carp and fantails and goldfish and all sorts of things. And then you've got Moat Lake, which is tench, skimmers, barbel and crusions. But there's no carp in that one. But we've sat here today on the first sort of main bowl on Moat Lake. And the point of the feature today is to demonstrate the difference between using natural baits on a fishery like this and pellets. Obviously we're just coming out of winter now. The weather's been a little bit iffy, so the carp and the skimmers and things like that aren't necessarily sort of straight on those pellets and things like that. You know, you can still catch on natural baits. So if you were to fish a match on a lot of the commercials this time of year, it can be you know, your first thought is whether or not you're going to catch on natural baits or whether you're going to catch on pellets and things like that. So hopefully today we're going to show the difference between the two. I'm going to feed three lines today. I'm going to feed a line to my left at 11 metres, which I'll be fishing with ground bait and maggots, and I'll fish a line to my right, which I'll be fishing pellets, maybe a little bit of corn as well. And then I've got a line at 6 metres where I'm going to be throwing maggots out of my hand, fishing through the water, and we'll hopefully catch a bit later on that, and hopefully catch quite well. Generally with those closer lines, that's where the fish will come when they're really feeding, so that's when we can really put some weight in the nets. A couple of things to say about this fishery. You do have to use fishery nets, both keep nets and landing nets. Dax Miller, who owns the place, is very, very hot on that. He's very hot on fish welfare, and that's why this place is so fantastic. And you also need to use fishery pellets. However, he's given us special permission today to use the dynamite stuff because I want to test some dynamite baits out today. So we'll run through the baits in a little while, but just be aware that if you do come here, it's fishery nets and fishery pellets only. Okay, I'm going to go through the rigs for today. Now it's very, very even here. There's very similar depths on all lines. So I've set up 3 rigs which will basically cover all 3 lines. There's about 6-7 foot of depth on the 3 lines, like I said. So I've set up 6 metres and 2 lines at 11 metres. There's no point in fishing really long today. We're the only anglers on the lake, and you catch a lot of fish close in here anyway. So my first rig is my sort of lighter rig. It's a 0.3 commercial indications RR1. That's ideal in this sort of depth. There's no wind today. It's a nice calm day, so we can fish nice and light, get really positive bites on it. That is tied to an 011 Matrix Pro Micron mainline, and I've got a very simple bulk of number 11s and 3 number 11 droppers, and I've got an 09 hook length with a size 18 barbless hook. It's quite a fine hook because we're going to be using expanders and maggots today, so we don't need to fish heavy. And that's just coupled to a light 3 to 6 hollow elastic, and obviously got a toss pot. So that's my first lighter rig. We've got a very similar rig but just slightly heavier. So this is a 0.5 commercial indications RR1 float. It's just obviously just get the fish, just get the bait down a little bit quicker if the fishing's really good. You know, you're not spending so much time just fishing through the water. You want to get the bait down to the bottom where the fish are feeding, so that's why we're using a slightly heavier float. Again, very similar 011 Pro Micron mainline. It's got a bulk of number 9s and 3 number 10 droppers, and again 09 hook length to an 18 barbless hook, and again same 3 to 6 hollow elastic. The third rig for the day, this is mainly for fishing on that 6 metre line where we're going to be feeding maggots by hand. Obviously because we're feeding by hand and we're feeding maggots that are a light bait, they're going to fall slowly through the water, so that might bring some fish off bottom, we might catch through the water. So what we're doing with that is we're fishing a light 0.4. This is a commercial indications prototype float that we're looking to release soon, and it's ideal for fishing through the water. It's carbon stem, so it's nice light float. You get a nice slow fall of the bait, and this is just tied to 011 main line, and I've got spread number 11 droppers, like a spread bulk. Obviously we can spread them further apart or bolt them up if we catch them really well. Again, just to give you a nice slow fall, and again that's to an 09 hook length with a size 18 barbless hook. And like I say, it's mainly for fishing maggots, so we'll probably just use this on the 6 metre line. But that's my 3 rigs for the day. Right, baits for today. As I've said, the main purpose of the feature today is to differentiate or see the advantages or disadvantages to using natural baits versus things like pellets and corn. As I've said before, this fishery, you are only allowed to use fishery pellets and fishery ground bait, but he's given a special permission today to use Dynamite Baits because I want to do some testing with it. So what we're going to be using initially on one of the lines is Dynamite's sinking micro pellets that have just been wetted down, and I'll be feeding those through a little toss pot, and over the top of that I'll be fishing the Dynamite's 4mm expanders on the hook. I might also put some corn in and fish corn, because corn's a very good bait here. You catch both skimmers and carp on it. So I've got some Dynamite Baits corn. Now on the other line I'm going to be feeding what we call more natural bait. So I've got some Dynamite Baits F1 sweet ground bait mixed up, and in it I've just got some dead red maggots. And again, over the top of that we're either going to be fishing dead maggots on the hook, or I've got some live maggots as well. Sometimes it can be good to fish live maggots over dead maggots. We'll see on the day which one wins out. These maggots as well, I'm also going to be feeding these out my hand at sort of 5-6 metres, try and catch through the water a little bit later on. There's some nice big roach in here, skimmers that we can catch off the bottom, so that could be really good later on. So it's quite a simple bait tray for the day really, nothing complicated, but hopefully it will show us as we go on through the day if there's a clear difference between which one's better. Right, so on my first line, my left hand 11 metre line, I'm just going to feed a bowl of F1 sweet with some dead red maggots in it. And all I'm doing is I'm just going to cut that in, lined up with a far bank marker, which is a tree on the far side. I've left a good distance between the two lines because obviously you don't want to confuse them, so you want to try and keep them a fair distance apart so you don't split your fish too much. So we just cut that in on my mark. And then for my right hand line, all I'm going to do is just put in a small ball of lightly squeezed micro pellets, just like that. Again, lined up with a far bank marker, which is a sign. Cut that in like that. Make sure everything's out of the cup. And then, like I said, I'm going to be feeding maggots out of my hand. So all I like to do is just gauge my distance, and then we're just going to feed, sorry, two handfuls at a time every time. And basically I'll probably do that every time I go out. You know, you're not hammering bait in, but you're going to keep a steady stream going in all day. So just 2 handfuls each time, every time I ship in or ship out, or if I'm waiting for a bite every few minutes, just so you got some bait going in all the time. But that's all 3 lines fed. It's dead simple. We're going to be introducing bait throughout the day. It's not a case of putting a lot of bait in at the start. It's a case of feeling your way into the session. You know, with commercials, it's better generally just to keep drip feeding in bait and fish for a few fish. Get too many fish in front of you, you can suffer with line bites and bumped fish, and especially today when we're fishing for a lot of bream and skimmers, the last thing you want to do is bump fish and lose them, because that'll just spook the shoal. So we're going to take it nice and easy. Most of the feed now is going to go through little pole pots on the end of the pole. Just keep things nice and tight and just drip feed it in, like I said. Okay, so we're fishing corn on the hook at the moment. Dead easy to hook. All I do is put the hook in through the blunt end and out through the side, so you've got plenty of point showing, and that stays on really, really well. It's nice and simple. And then what we're feeding is just 2 bits of corn in the cup, and then just pellets over the top, and just thumb it down, and that'll stay in as you ship out. But it'll come out nice and easy when you tap it. It's dead simple. Once you ship out to your marker, I like to lower the rig in first, and then just turn the pot over, tap them out over the top like that. Sometimes it can pay to feed first and lower your rig in over the top of it. Missed a bite. Right, we've just hooked the second fish. Unfortunately, the first fish came off. I think it was a carp that's fouled up, but this feels like a skimmer. So I'm on my pellet line, pellet and corn. Corn's a very, very good bait here, so I've just put a bit of corn on, and all I'm doing is putting a couple of bits of corn in the pot and some micros, and yeah, it's a nice skimmer. A good stamp here, sort of between £1 and £2 each, so you can soon make a good weight of these. That's a lovely fish. Don't need too many of them to build a good weight, that's for sure. That was probably £1.50. So we'll go straight back out again, same line. And we're just nicking a piece of corn on the hook, and then we're just putting 2 bits of corn in the pot, topping it off with micros. Just pat it down with your thumb and ship back out. Ship out to 11 metres, we're on my right hand line, which is the pellet line. And just lower that in. There's some fish out there because there's a lot of bubbles coming up. There is a lot of fish in this lake, and that's why I'm only feeding a little bit of bait at a time, because you just don't want a peg full of fish that are blowing and going a bit crazy, because all you'd end up is foul hooking them with too many fish in your peg. So try and fish for a fish or two each time I ship out, and just a few maggots on my 5 metre line. Keep that fed for later on, hopefully catch some fish there. Getting little knocks and dinks already on the float straight away. Yeah, it's absolutely full of fish, this place is. It's a little bit of a silty bottom here, so you have to be careful where you plumb up. Try and plumb up and find a harder area to feed on, because otherwise, if you feed on a silty area, what will happen is your bait will just go into the silt, and the fish will kick up the silt, and that's when you get, it's like a jacuzzi effect, and the fish just end up going a bit crazy, and that can be the worst. You can just get line bite after line bite and foul hook fish left, right and centre. Just missed a bite. Just had my hook bait off. So we'll repeat the process again. Just another bit of corn. All I'm doing is just nicking it through the skin, out through the side, and again, there's fish there, so I'll feed again. 2 bits of corn in the pot, topped off some micros, pat it down. Shipping out again, so we'll just feed that 5 metre line again. Just 2 handfuls. And ship straight out to 11 metres, line it up with my marker, lower that rig in nicely. And then just tap the bait in over the top. As you can see, I'm fishing quite a short line between my tip and my float, because want to be hitting bites quite quickly here. It's a nice still day, there's no wind. If there was wind I'd fish a bit of a longer line, obviously, to get better presentation, but I can fish nice and direct today, and just try and hit bites quickly. You can get quite fast bites when these fish are competing, so we want to connect with them quite quickly. Again, as soon as that floats in, getting little movements on it already. Just try and make sure that it's a bite when you hit it. I said this before in my last video. When you're fishing for skimmers like we are today with the odd carp, you don't want to spook them, and that can be the worst thing when you're catching weights of skimmers, is pricking a fish and then you'll find that you don't get a bite for a while because they spook off. So I'm just making sure it's a proper bite before I strike. Carp do muscle in, and they're quite big fish, sort of average 4 or 5 pound here. So you do get line bites off of them, so you can get odd line bites, but that can't really be helped. Just keeping that feed relatively sparingly, just ensure that you don't get a peg full of fish flying around everywhere. What I'll do is I'll carry on this line for another few fish, and then I'll try my ground bait line with dead maggots and see if that's any better or any worse. That's the key to today, really, is just demonstrating what's going to work better on the day. I'm on my 0.5 rig at the moment, fishing corn. Corn's quite heavy bait, so you know, you're fishing it on the bottom, don't really need to use the light rig. You want to get it straight down and fish in. If I go into expander, I like to give that a little bit of a slower fall, so I'll probably use the 0.3 rig for that, but the 0.5 for corn is about perfect in this sort of 6-7 foot depth that we got here. Right, we're about an hour into the session now, and to be honest, it's going really well. We've got I've had about 20 bream, some skimmers as well. There's a lot of fish out there. There's a lot of fish that are blowing as well. Having to be really careful with how I feed. I've foul hooked a few fish. There's just so many fish in here, and if you're not careful, they go a bit crazy and you swim like a jacuzzi. Right, we're about 2 hours in now, and it's been really good, to be honest. I've had probably about 30 bream now. I've lost 2 carp. The fish were starting to come off the deck a little bit on my pellet line where I've been feeding pellet and fishing corn. So I've just come off that just to let it settle for a little bit, and I've just gone back onto my ground bait and maggot line. This definitely hasn't been as good today. Those fish definitely want the pellet today. It's I think where it's just starting to warm up a bit, they want that extra protein. If it had still been really cold, I would have expected the ground bait and maggot to be the better approach. I mean, there's still fish to be caught on both lines, but it is just clear that that pellet line is so much better. What I can do as an option is, if those fish are insistent in coming off bottom, and regardless of how much I feed, they'll still want to come off bottom, is I can target them shallow. I've got a shallow rig set up, and then I can just ping 4 mils over the top and either feed corn or a banded 6 mil on the hook, something like that. We'll probably see more carp that way doing that, but we'll catch the skimmers as well. But yeah, I mean, it's clear moving onto this line, this is the longest I've had to wait for a bite now for a while. It's been pretty instant on my pellet line, so I'm not going to give this too long. I just wanted to give that other line a bit of time to settle. Still getting bubbles coming up on this line, but I think it's smaller fish. I've had a couple of roach off this line, some smaller skimmers. Don't think it's quite positive enough today. In a match scenario, when it had been harder, this line could have been a real sort of banker line, because the fish just get a little bit more finicky. So it could have been a good, a good sort of line to drop back on when the fish start to get a bit cagey, because it's more natural baits. It gives them something else that's not a pellet. When everybody else is feeding pellets, it could be an advantage. Swap to my other rig. Go back on that other line, which is still fizzing away over there, my right hand 11 metre line. I'm conscious of not trying to target fish up in the water too soon, because there's a possibility it could blow your peg. You know, we are catching steady, catching skimmers and bream like this, so it's by no means bad at the moment. It's just that those fish just want to come off the deck. So we are foul looking odd ones, and no matter how much you cat back on the feed, you know, you're virtually feeding hardly anything and they're still coming off the deck. So it just seems to be that's where they want to be. But I think once I start pinging 4 mils over the top, that could attract the attention of the carp that are in here, so it might change it slightly. But yeah, there's fish out there. We're getting indications straight away, and loads of bubbles coming up. So I'm just potting in just 2 grains of corn and about 15-20 micros. I just missed a bite. And then fishing a grain of corn on the hook. I fished pellet on the hook, I fished expander on the hook, and it took a lot longer to get bites. There's a lot of colour in this water, and I'm a firm believer that when it's really coloured, a nice visible bait is really good. You know, the fish homing on it straight away. What I also like about corn is when there's a lot of fish in your peg, corn's quite heavy and it tends to sit on the bottom more than an expander that can get wafted around. You can fish a bigger pellet like a 6 mil, but there's another fish. But corn, I'm a big fan of corn, especially this sort of time of year. It's just a great bait. It's a great bait that goes really well with micro pellet. Another skimmer. Another good £1.5 fish there. I was really nailed that bait, set it right down. So like I say, we've had loads of these fish now. It's been a really good day. It's not a difficult fishery to figure out this. It's difficult to figure out how to catch the fish and keep them coming all day, keep them on the deck or keep them up in the water. That's the real key to it. And then fish again. So plenty of fish down there. clear difference between this and that ground bait line. Well, that 5 minutes we gave it on the ground bait line, we just didn't have a bite on it. I could have stayed on it and got bites on it, but there's no point when this is the clear winner. This might be a carp actually, it's pulling a bit quite well. It's great using these light hollows because you can get away with using fine hook lengths and light lines, and you know, you can get every fish out. We're only on a 0.9 bottom, so it's not particularly heavy, but I've got no problems landing carp when we need to. I'm sure this is a carp in the way it's fighting. Just putting up a little bit of a scrap. Definitely going well, this little fish. I'm pretty sure it is a little carp. Yeah, it is. So it's the first one we've had, but that seems to be the way it tends to go here. You tend to catch the skimmers early before those carp move in. Tried to mug him there, but he wasn't quite ready. There we go. Nice mirror. £3. Nice little weight builder. Lovely little fish. Perfect condition as well. Put him back. So that was a nice little carp we've just had. Could be the sign that there's more down there as well. Or it could be a one-off. It's with this lake, sometimes you'll just sit on carp and you'll catch them all day. Sometimes you'll catch mainly bream and hardly a carp, and then other times you just get odd carp mixed in. That's what's nice about this place, is that you don't always know that it's going to be sort of out and out carp. Just missed a bite there. Oh dear. So yeah, you kind of have to. That's why you have to tailor your gear, the tackle that you're using, to make sure that you can catch bream and carp. So you don't really want to be overgunned so that you're losing bream and pulling out of them, because they're good weight builders on a day. Oh, it's a leaf. So that's why I'm using light hollows, light lines, and small hooks really. You could come down and you could fish 0.14 bottoms or whatever, and you know, in the summer, and you can catch carp like that, but I think you're missing out on good weight building fish, because there's that many skimmers in here. It's not just about targeting the carp when you want to do well. You've got to be able to catch both. Some big roach in here as well. I came down and did a feature here with Pole Fishing magazine, and we had some roach that were approaching a pound. Some lovely fish. You normally catch them on caster. I've been feeding maggot close, just see if we can get some of them later on. 5-6 metres. Missed another bite. So you know, there's an opportunity for us to have a look for those later on. But at the moment, just on this one line is absolutely solid. So it's just a case of just keep taking fish off this line, resting it every now and again, being careful not to overfeed the fish, and just, yeah, it's pretty simple really when it's like this. It's pretty much a red letter day. A bite every chuck. Bearing in mind that we're still single figure air temperatures, I don't think it's too bad catching a fish a chuck when they're the stamp that they are. These fish are definitely coming off the bottom, so I think I'm going to have to look at going shallower soon, because starting to miss a few bites now. So that is a sign that those fish just don't want to stay on the bottom. Ah, look, we fouled at one up in the water, so I'm going to put on a shallow rig now, I think. If this fish stays on, it might not stay on, it might come off. And that was about 1.5 foot off bottom, and it might ping off. Yep, like that, unfortunately. Right, it's time to have a look shallow. Right, we've fouled a few fish, and regardless of what I seem to be able to do, they seem to want to come off bottom. It's just that many fish in here competing for food. So I'm going to change my approach slightly, and I'm going to start fishing shallow. But I'm fishing deep shallow to start with, so I've got a 0.4 rig here. It's just a 0.4 Preston float with a thick tip, just obviously to support the bait, and we've got strung number 9 shot. It's a strung bulk, and just a 09 hook length again to a size 16 hook, and we're just going to fish corn. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to ping 4mm pellets over the top, and just try and bring them fish up and try and find the fish at the depth that those fish want to feed at. So hopefully that will start to connect with a few more bites, and we'll stop bumping fish and start hooking them. So that's the aim. Right, so going up on this shallow rig, and we're fishing over the same line. Like I said, we're fishing deep shallow, so we're only about a foot off the bottom. So instead of coming up to like 2 foot, 3 foot deep, we're still sort of 4.5, 5 foot in 6 foot of water, 6 foot-ish of water. And all we're doing is just laying that in and pinging 4mm over the top. And what that should do is just attract the attention of the fish and bring them up off bottom. They're off bottom anyway. It's clear they don't want to settle on the bottom, so hopefully this will be an easier way for us to catch them. So you don't need to feed loads, you just want to feed 5 or 6 4mm at a time, but just keep it constantly going in. There's one little indication there. Just keep it going on top of the float all the time, and that should bring those fish up. And then obviously once they start competing for food, then they'll probably come higher and higher in the water, and that's when we might start catching them, a couple of feet or even a foot deep. Just depends on where these fish feel comfortable. They'll tell you. What I tend to do is I tend to come off the bottom slightly and then keep working my way up. If I'm missing bites, I'll take another 6 inches off until I start connecting with bites. Likewise, if I've come up too much and I'm not getting bites, I'll put 6 inches on and go deeper until I find where the fish want to be. So it's letting the fish tell you. A lot of people just sort of go in straight away at like 2 foot deep, thinking that's where they'll catch, but it's all about where the fish feel comfortable. So you've got to let them tell you where they want to be. Pinging 4mm over the top. And we've just got a bit of corn on the hook at the moment. We can change to pellet if need be. It's just falling through. What can sometimes be really good is fishing corn skins as well, because they tend to flutter down a little bit more enticingly. Just a lighter bait, but at the moment just fishing a bit of corn. That seems to be the best bait so far today. So just pinging these over the top, and I'm careful of not overfeeding, because if it doesn't work coming up the deck, then if we don't feed too much, we don't go too crazy with the feed, then we can always go back on the bottom. Sometimes if you just put a cup of pellet over the top, it draws the fish back down to the bottom. Ideally you don't want to be messing about trying to bring them up, push them down again. You want to try and stick to one thing, but it does seem clear today that these fish want to be off the deck, so I think this will work, but it just takes them a little bit of time to find the feed again. So we've just added that 6 inches extra depth. We'll just see if that brings us some more indications. It's a funny one because those fish didn't want to seem to get their heads on bottom, but they're not quite off it. So we're only probably less than a foot off the bottom now, but we're not getting anywhere near the amount of indications that we were getting when we were fishing hard on the deck. So it says to me that those fish are still rooting around down there. But if I put my full depth rig on, we're foul hooking quite a few fish. Like I say, I was being really steady with the bait, only putting a small amount of pellet in, not feeding every fish, just to try and stop them from fizzing away and foul looking fish. But the last few fish I'd foul looked were sort of felt like they were a foot off bottom. When you lift up to strike and you make contact after a while, it seemed to me like they were about a foot off bottom, which is about where we are now, but we're not getting any indications at the moment. So what I might do is I might not try and force them to come up, but I might go back down on the deck again and just see if we can keep them down there. Yeah, so we're not getting any indications at the moment at all. So let's go back on the full deck rig, see what happens. Although I've been pinging 4 mils over the top, I haven't put a great deal in, so it shouldn't have caused too many problems. So let's just have a go now. What can sometimes happen is, because of the silt, it can cause the fish just to go scatty anyway, as much as you try not to, or try to avoid it. And then sometimes what you can do is look to change lines and you know, maybe start another line slightly to the left, slightly to the right, slightly further out, whatever you want to do, and sort of start over again. That can sometimes work, but we'll see what happens with this. So as you all know, I'm the captain of Matrix Dynamite Trentman, who are in my opinion one of the best teams in the country at the moment. There's a lot of teams out there competing at a high level, and I think we're well up there with some of the best. And we've recently qualified for the World Club final in France, at Saint Quentin, I think it's called, after qualifying on the census challenge on the Gloucester Canal. I personally couldn't fish due to personal reasons, but my lads fished it and did really well. They came 7th out, I think, 34 teams, and their teams there from France and all the best teams in the country basically. So they did really well to come 7th and qualify. So that's a big thing for the team at the moment. And we also qualified for the Winter League final after coming 2nd in our Winter League, a league that I personally had quite a good result at as well. I came 2nd individually. I was tied with 1st place, but unfortunately dropped to 2nd due to having one less section win. But that was a nice result for me to be able to captain the team to the Winter League final, and then obviously now to the World Club finals in France as well. So it seems clear now that obviously going back on the deck, the fish are there. I think it's just going to be one of those days where we just have to try and keep them pinned as much as I can. Sometimes you're going to catch the odd, or sometimes you're going to foul hook the odd fish, but definitely seems to be where they want to be, is on or very close to the bottom. So about 3 hours in now, and it's been yeah, it's been good. It's been solid. We've probably had over 45 pound of skimmers and a couple of carp. Very hard to keep these fish pinned on the deck though. So I've just picked up my deep shallow rig again, just see if there's any fish that are off the deck. It didn't work too well before, but it's so difficult to keep these fish pinned that I'm hoping this might work. There's just loads of bubbles coming up everywhere, and it's probably 1 in 4 fish are being foul hooked, so it's very tricky to keep them pinned where we want them on the deck. We're on the right bait. Corn is definitely outscoring everything today. I think the water's so coloured that it seems to be the best way to go. It's just finding the depth that they want to be at. That's the tricky bit. They just sort of, they seem to want a bait that's falling past them, but they don't want to sit on a bait that's hanging. You just need to keep lifting and dropping it, I think, to try and catch them off the deck. I've seen fish shallow. I've seen carp swirling, There we go, and that worked. Right, so we're coming up to the end of the day now. I tried the short line, where I've been feeding micros at 5 metres, and I've had a few fish off it, but I just don't think they were settling properly there. There's been a little bit of commotion on the bank with people watching and us filming, so I just think it was, you know, it stopped the fish from settling close, whereas normally you'd catch really well there at the end of the day. It's been a good day. It's been a very good day. We've caught a lot of fish. It's been plainly obvious that ground bait and maggot line to the left just wasn't right on the day for catching what we're catching. Like I said before, I think had it been a bit colder, that would have been a very good ploy. But as it's starting to warm up now, these fish are starting to move a little bit. The pellet is definitely outscored, and the corn, and that corn has been, oh, it's just come off. That corn has been miles better on the hook as well. It's been, you get bites on expander pellet, but it just takes a lot longer, and the fish were definitely smaller. This corn is sorting out the better fish, there's no doubt about that. And it's been really good. It's been tricky at times. The first half of the session was very, very tricky. The fish wanted to come off the deck. They were all sort of different depths. They didn't really want to feed. I had a go at sort of shallow fishing and deep shallow, and caught fish on it. We had a spell where I caught a few fish and they were bigger, but they just didn't want to stay there. They definitely feel more comfortable on the bottom, but it's like that they're sort of sitting mid depth, but they want to follow the feed down. And obviously, because there's so many fish in the peg, regardless of how little I've fed, you just get quite a few liners, and we've foul hooked quite a few fish today. So it's been frustrating at times, but you know, that's me being very critical, because we have still caught an awful lot of fish. We've only had about, I don't know, 3 or 4 carp, but we've had a lot of skimmers. You know, I've got, yeah, well, over 50 skimmers, and they're all a good stamp. So yeah, I can't knock it. I could have fished down the edge today. I probably would have caught carp doing that, but that's not what I came here today for. I've come here to sort of see what the difference would be between natural baits and pellets, and there's no doubt about it, pellets have outscored on this occasion. Well, as you can see, we've had a hell of a day here today on Wold Farm Fishery on the Oaks Lake. Probably nearly £100 a bream there. You just can't get better than that. It's barely got, well, single figures temperature wise today. It's March. And It's absolutely solid with fish here. I mean, look at that. You cannot beat that for a day's fishing, can you? I don't think there's anywhere you can go in the country that's as good at this as skimmer fishing. Right, well, just to give you a quick summary of the day today, it's been a fantastic day. I mean, we've had probably £100 of bream, which just you can't beat this time of year. It's crazy. We came here with the idea of testing pellets against natural baits like ground bait and maggot, and it was quite clear from very early on that because it's warming up here and the fish are starting to move, pellets outscored absolutely everything. Pellets and corn turned out to be the best on the day, the best combination. We fished 2 lines long at 11 metres, and you know, it was chalk and cheese. You were waiting for bites. You could catch fish on ground bait and maggots, but it was nowhere near as good. You know, you catch 5 times as many fish over the pellet that you would over the ground bait. The ground bait's fantastic. It's a brilliant ground bait, and I highly recommend it. But for this particular fishery, because it's mainly a pellet fishery, it's all they tend to feed here. Pellet just outscored on the day. We tried fishing a little bit closer in towards the end of the day, caught a few fish over it, but it just wasn't quite right. I think with all the bankside disturbance, the fish just wanted to push out to a safer distance. But you know, what a fishery this is. So you can book onto the fishery by ringing Dax. Dax Miller, his name is. Go on the Wold Farm Fisheries website to get his number. It's £10 a day for a day ticket, which is just ridiculously good value for money for the amount of fish that you can catch here. 3 lakes that you can fish, and it's just so good. I'd just like to emphasise again that it is fishery owned keep nets and landing nets, which he will provide to you, and he'll give you plenty. He gave me 4 today, so we have plenty to use, and it is fishery pellets and fishery ground bait only. He gave us special permission to use Dynamite stuff today because we wanted to do some testing with it. I'd just like to thank Fishing for Info again for doing this filming video with me, and I'd like to thank my sponsors Matrix and Dynamite Baits for backing me. Yeah, you know, if you fancy catching £100 of bream, then come on down, it's fantastic.